8 men were sitting together in a nearly empty room of a small house. The room only had a basic wooden table and 8 chairs. A single lamp on the table lit the space. One of the men was reading a book, holding it close to the lamp to see the words clearly. There was a 9th person in the room, the owner of the house, but he wasn't sitting or talking. He was lying on the table, covered by a white sheet. He was dead. The house was quiet. Outside, you could hear the sounds of birds and insects in the trees. These noises were strange to people visiting from the city, but the men in the room didn't even notice them. They were used to it. 7 of the men were farmers and woodsmen, working outdoors all year round. Their faces were weathered from the sun and wind, and they wore wide-brimmed hats. The man reading the book stood out. He wasn't dressed like the others, and his face was smooth, sharp, and intelligent. He had the look of someone educated and important. He was the coroner, the official in charge of investigating deaths. The men were there to do something serious. They were holding an inquest, an investigation into how the man on the table had died. The coroner was reading from the dead man's diary. Everyone was waiting for a witness to show up. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a horse galloping toward the house. The horse came to a stop outside, and a young man walked in quickly. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "We've been waiting for you," the coroner replied. "We need to finish this tonight. Hugh Morgan has to be buried tomorrow morning." "Where were you?" "I was at the telegraph office," said the young man. "I sent a report about Morgan's death to the San Francisco newspapers. I'm a reporter. I write stories for them." The coroner frowned. "We're not here for a newspaper story. We need to know what happened to Mr. Morgan. You're here to tell the truth. Can you swear to do that?" "Yes, I'll tell the truth," the young man replied. "But you might not believe me." "That's not a great start," the coroner said. "Is the story in your newspaper report different from what you'll tell us here?" For a moment, the young man looked frustrated. Then he said, "I'm here to tell you exactly what happened. I swear I'll be honest. Everything I say will be true. You can read what I sent to the newspaper. It's not made up. It's exactly what I saw, heard, and did." "All right, let's get started," said the coroner. The men removed their hats. The young man raised his right hand and began speaking slowly and clearly. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God," he said. "What's your name?" asked the coroner. "William Harker." "How old are you?" 27. "Did you know Hugh Morgan, the deceased?" "Yes, I did." "Were you with him when he died?" "I was nearby." "All right. Tell us what happened," the coroner said. "Why were you with Mr. Morgan, and what did you see?" "I was visiting him," Harker explained. "Morgan and I were close friends. I live in San Francisco, but I'd often come out here to stay with him. We'd hunt birds and animals in the forest and fish in the rivers. We'd done that together many times." "Okay, tell us what happened on the day Hugh Morgan died," said the coroner. We left the house at sunrise, Harker began. We were planning to hunt quails. We brought Morgan's dog along, and we each had a shotgun. Morgan told me, "There's a field of wild oats over the hill. It's full of big, plump quails, perfect for eating." So we headed to the field. But we found something much bigger than quails. "What do you mean?" the coroner asked. "Did you come across another animal?" "Well, yes, or no," Harker stammered. "I'm not sure what kind of animal it was. I saw the oats moving in the field, like something was coming toward us. I couldn't see the animal itself, but I could tell it was big." Morgan didn't say a word. He just raised his gun and aimed at the moving oats. Harker paused and glanced toward the window. "Go on, Mr. Harker," the coroner prompted. "What happened next?" "I pointed at the moving plants," Harker said. "I told Morgan, if that's a deer, a shotgun won't take it down. You'd need a rifle for that. But what if it's something bigger, like a bear or a mountain lion?" Morgan didn't say anything. He just kept aiming his gun, staring at the oats. That's when I started feeling scared. If it was a bear or a lion, our shotguns wouldn't be enough to stop it. "Mr. Harker," interrupted the coroner, "you mentioned it was a large animal. Are you familiar with the difference between a bear, a lion, or a deer?" "Yes, sir, I am," Harker replied quickly, a hint of frustration in his voice. "And that's exactly why this is so strange. I could see the oats moving, and I could hear something coming through the plants, but I couldn't see what it was. There was this big thing heading right for us, but it was invisible." "Did you talk to Mr. Morgan again?" the coroner asked. "Yeah, I did," said Harker. "I yelled, 'What is it?' but Morgan didn't answer. Whatever it was, the animal or whatever, kept coming closer, and Morgan got ready to fire his gun. Then, out of nowhere, he shouted, 'It's that damned thing!' He sounded absolutely terrified." "Do you think Morgan knew what it was?" asked the coroner. "Is that what you're saying, Mr. Harker?" "Yes, sir," Harker replied. "I think Morgan had seen it before. Then he fired his gun, and I heard this awful sound. It was like the scream of a wild animal." "Did you fire your gun too?" the coroner asked. "No, I didn't. I couldn't," Harker said. "The smoke from Morgan's gun got in my eyes, and I couldn't see where to aim. Then, all of a sudden, Morgan dropped his gun and just took off running." "He left you behind?" the coroner asked. "Well, yeah, it surprised me," Harker admitted. "But I didn't have time to think about it because something knocked me to the ground." "What knocked you down?" "I don't know. I didn't see it," Harker said. "It felt soft but heavy, and it moved really fast." "And what happened after that?" "I heard these wild screams, like dogs fighting," Harker said. "Then I saw Morgan. He was on the ground, fighting with something. He was fighting for his life." "Fighting what?" the coroner asked. "I don't know," Harker stammered. "I couldn't see anything or anyone. but Morgan was on the ground, and there was this weird movement in the air around him. It's hard to describe. It was like the fight was happening underwater or something. Sometimes I couldn't see one of Morgan's hands. Sometimes his head seemed to disappear. Then he'd move again. "Did you try to help him?" the coroner asked. "Of course. I ran over to him," Harker said. "But by the time I got there, he was already like this." He pointed to Morgan's lifeless body on the table. "And the animal? Where was it?" "I don't know." The oats in the field started moving again, like the wind was blowing through them. Whatever it was, it just disappeared into the woods. My friend was dead, and I ran into town to find a police officer. "All right," the coroner said. "Let's take a look at the body." He pulled the white sheet back from Morgan's body and removed a handkerchief tied around the dead man's head that had kept his mouth closed. The other men leaned in, their faces tense. One of them lifted the lamp high, casting its light over Morgan's still form. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the body of the dead man. Hugh Morgan's neck was ripped open, and his body was covered with deep, horrible wounds. His clothes were soaked in blood. "Gentlemen, you've heard Mr. Harker's account," the coroner said. "And you've seen Mr. Morgan's body. What should we write on the death certificate? Was he killed by a wild animal, or was it murder? We have to decide." The 7 men left the room, whispering among themselves for a couple of minutes. Harker turned to the coroner. "I see you've got Morgan's diary, sir. Have you read it? Does it explain anything?" "I skimmed through it," the coroner replied. "No, it doesn't say anything about what caused his death." The 7 men came back into the room. One of them stepped forward and faced the coroner. "We believe Hugh Morgan was killed by a mountain lion," he said. "Thank you, gentlemen," said the coroner. "You're dismissed. Mr. Morgan will be buried tomorrow morning. I'll arrange for an undertaker." With that, the inquest was over. But the story wasn't. Harker, being a writer, was determined to dig deeper. He wanted to read Morgan's diary and write about his friend's mysterious death. After the funeral, he stayed in town. A few days later, when Morgan's belongings were sold, Harker bought the diary. Morgan had been a solitary man, and he'd poured his thoughts into his journal. But he hadn't always written dates, and some pages were torn or missing. Here are some of the final entries Harker found. "My dog is acting weird. He barks and spins in circles, staring at something that's not there. He even chases. Nothing." This has happened several times now. September 1st. Tonight, I was stargazing on the hill when something strange happened. Something, or someone, moved between me and the stars. For a moment, the stars looked like ripples in a pool after you throw a stone in. Am I losing my mind? September 27th. It's back. It's circling the house. I keep my gun beside me at all times now. This morning, I found footprints in the soft dirt around the house. What's going on? Am I going insane? October 2nd. I won't leave my home. I refuse to run away because of this thing, but I think it's driving me mad. October 5th. I've invited my friend Harker to stay with me. I won't say anything about it. I want to see if he notices anything. Maybe he'll figure this out. Maybe he'll see the thing too. Can the dog see it? I'm sure the dog hears it. He hears things I can't. But can he see it? Maybe that's the key. If there are sounds people can't hear, could there be colors we can't see? Is the damned thing a color humans can't see?